Hello everyone, it's Mike Levin, Wednesday, July 27th at about 9:20 a.m. 2016, and I am on my way into work thinking about today's work. For the first time in weeks, I am what I believe delivering on the latest big project. The current versions of what I'm putting forth are like, yeah, that's what we need. So I have more cycles available for the other sort of supplementary projects that were either part of it or sort of on the outside while I was working on this latest project, ready to be incorporated into and improved and rolled up into the greater project, which is currently SEO Notebook, that unifies a few of my GitHub projects and is the next phase in the evolution that sort of has been gone through 360i Tiger, Pipulate, and now finally SEO Notebook under Jupyter Notebook, soon to be Jupyter Lab, so my thing might become SEO Lab. And I am once again alleviated of a great deal of user interface responsibility by using Jupyter Notebook, which has its entirely own I/O model that again is going to be enhanced greatly through Jupyter Lab, with output from your programs being able to be targeted at stationary modules. So it's going to be really fantastic in terms of visualizations and reporting and I/O. Making parameters to your functions into little widgets that have sliders so you can do a lot of experimentation, that sort of thing. But for a while I'm going to stay on Notebook Classic because there's just enough learning and thinking to do to re-platform myself, and it'll be a transitional re-platforming now, I can see, as all re-platformings are traditional or transitional, because traditional platforms go away. They might be elevated to something like a spec and a specification, even with an implementation, which over time will be virtualized as the real original hardware of the platform becomes rarer to actually have. And it's more likely you'll be using platforms that are simulated on other platforms that are a superset that have all the capabilities, the I/O capabilities. If the original platform had a touchscreen, some future thing will either have or be able to simulate a touchscreen. But at any rate, that is the mental framework in which all work should be done these days, unless you're developing for a current popular platform and you're trying to cash in on its popularity, putting something out in the App Store or Google Play, for example, and intending to sort of cash in now, which is of course a large part of the professional software development world. So I don't begrudge anyone that, but it's certainly not my approach. I code as I code at my job, not as my job. That's what I'm trying to say. Coding is just a capability to me. I am not an application developer as such, because I'm generally not developing applications for other people. It wasn't really until GitHub that I saw how, easy it was for me to share that code, and it wasn't until Jupyter Notebook that I saw a way more viable than my own Linux platform to share actual running implementations of my code on modern platforms. So many possible directions to go with all this discussion, but I want to make sure it gets back to what my work is for today. And so on my third implementation of an SEO ad hoc investigation, reporting, and sometimes scheduling project called SEO Notebook, I have reduced the complexity of my code and the number of lines as Jupyter Notebook does away with my need to do anything with the Flask micro framework. I don't need Flask in the picture. I don't need a CSS framework. I was using Picnic CSS, but that would be things like Twitter Bootstrap. I don't need to choose one of those. I don't need to choose any JavaScript libraries to handle making the the visuals more interesting. I was using velocity.js. I don't need that anymore. I was using that in Pipulate. I was also making fairly heavy use of web fonts whenever I needed a visual. Instead of using graphics, I just created a new glyph inside a web font and updated the web font in the GitHub repo. Don't need that anymore. And so everything has been sort of teared and stripped down, such that the current implementation of SEO Notebook, if you don't include some of the externalized libraries I made to handle things like Google Spreadsheet IO and the Pipulate functions themselves, the framework part of it is something like 20, 30 lines of code right now. Smallest I've ever made it, easiest to understand. Yes, the eval statement is still in there, used in one of the most benign ways I can imagine eval being used, creating instances of objects from their string names inside packages that are under your control on hardware that's not really a server anyway. Very little hacking vectors on this stuff. But nonetheless, it's easy to understand. It's very few lines of code. And I'm at the point now where it's taking input. And I made a different decision than usual with how Pipulate functions take their input. Usually I would construct an input parameter string and feed it to it, where something equaled something and something else equaled something else, as you fed as parameters to the functions based on, how they were written. There was a bit of introspection so that you were matching what the spreadsheet had available with the parameters being fed into the functions that you wanted to execute. And I simplified that enormously by using one of Python's more powerful features. It's difficult to state the name of it, but it's written as asterisk KW args, ** keyword args, you might say. And what it basically is feeding a whole Python dictionary object into, I'll go this way, I'm walking on 27th Street for a little bit of a change of scenery today, but it's a good time to switch back. It's getting a little crowded. Okay, so ** KW args lets you feed a whole dictionary as the input parameter to a function, and then the function can unpackage it and use its contents however it likes by known convention. It's an interesting API. Basically, it's stating if it's the only input parameter on your function, the API is feed your function a dictionary object. Let it unpackage it and sort things out, knowing about what it's expecting to find in that dictionary object. And that is a pretty big blanket behavioral convention thunking down to a standard that I've been very hesitant to do in past versions of this, because I wanted any function that you wrote in Python to be drop-in, plug-in compatible with Pipulate. And that meant that you write your functions with whatever API you design for them. And when I say an API for a function, you choose your parameters or arguments or inputs, and you give them their names. I guess you don't have to state their data types, but you imagine their data types. And then there's the output of the function as well. And that's the bit I'll be doing today. Now that I have done this strongly opinionated conventional behavior for function input, given each Pipulate function all the data available on the row it was found on in the tabular data source like a spreadsheet. So basically, one of your columns is named title. When title executes, the whole row that that was found on is available, so that you have URL and you have whatever other filled in cells were on that row along with title. And so now, say it takes a URL, it uses the request object to get the page, and it's ready to, and it parsed out the title. I'll probably do a little regex video this morning, or XPath or something. But it grabbed the title, and it's ready to send it back to the framework to be plugged in to its cell in the tabular data source. That's the output. So I have some decisions to make today as far as conventions of how manipulate functions return values. And I've been thinking about this for a while, and I'm about to take a different path than I've taken in any of my past implementations, where I have always just assumed that, or relied upon, Python's ability to read any value or any variable or object or whatever you want to call it as a true-false Boolean value. And with that, you can actually determine whether anything came back, or whether what came back is a blank, a space, a zero, whatever, and keep it from updating the spreadsheet accordingly. The problem with that is there is ambiguity, and this feature of Python that's normally a great productivity boon, because you don't need a parallel set of values to always keep track of some simple binary true-false state of your process. If the false states happen to align with Python's chosen false states. 0 as a value evaluates false, as does empty and none. So there's a whole variety of things that evaluate false, but that might actually be the value that a pipulate function is returning. Like, say it tries to visit a page and it gets a 404 error. What should be returned by the pipulate function that had the responsibility to visit a URL that has no content? Or it has content, it has whatever is put in the template of the 404 page, so it's sitting on top of content. But there is this metadata swimming around saying, oh, well, yeah, I gave you content, but that was fallback content because what you were really looking for couldn't be found. And there was a numerical 404 sent back to the browser. The browser has the 404 error code, so the browser knows it was a page not found. The user knows it was a page not found because the template inside the page not found page contains something like error 404, page not found. Well, why should pipulate not be able to hold on to that meta information and not blend it into a single response channel when a Python function can return any sort of Pythonic object, any sort of Python object as its response? So instead of returning a single value, why not return a tuple, with the first location of the tuple being a response code? In fact, I could identically mimic the HTTP response codes, because why not? And then when I check the status of the response code using the framework, looking at the first value of the tuple, I can even go so far as to just look at the first character of what came back. So I can treat all 4s the same way, all 2s the same way. 2 are successful, by the way, whereas 4 is unsuccessful. 5 is some sort of server error. Well, there's server-side errors and there's client-side errors. So 3s are what's used for redirect. So it redirects the client to some other location. So I could even tell when a redirect occurred. So I'm very likely now today to make my work into creating the part of the API of SEO Notebook that deals with how values get returned to the framework, making it two-channel, using a tuple. First location of the tuple being a response code. Second location of the tuple being the data of the response. So it'll be actually holding, most likely, the text of the 404 page there. And also know that it was a page not found error, so I can make the framework respond accordingly. There's a lot of granularity in what a success or a failure is, and you should not go success-failure binary too extreme at the wrong point in the process. To preserve that data, carry it down, pass the baton. So that'll be my talking head video today, and I believe I'll have time to do it because I'm not in quite the crunch that I had been before, and it supports every other project I'm doing. So thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon, and as usual, don't forget to subscribe.